Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today I have another Porsche GB car on the channel, which is always exciting. You don't see too many Panameras on the road here in the UK, but if you head over to the Porsche UK website and the configurator, you'll actually discover that there are 19 different base spec Panameras available. 19. And that's before any of the hundreds of options. They start at £70,000 for the base model Panamera Saloon, and they rise right up to this bad boy, which is the Panamera Turbo S E-Hybrid Sport Turismo. Yeah, that's its full name. And this retails at about £145,000, so more than double of the base spec Saloon. But the base spec Saloon has a mere 330 horsepower, which I'm sure is enough for pretty much everyone anyway. This one has a combined 700 horsepower of output. It also has 870 Newton meters of torque. So I think it's going to be quick enough in a straight line at least. This being a UK press car, well, it's not £145,000. In fact, this is just over £163,000, so it has £18,000 worth of options on it, and I would say that's probably what the average customer of one of these are going to spend. But it's very, very nice inside and outside. It's quite a subtle spec, I'm sure you agree, but there are some telltale signs aside from the badging across the back. Well, those massive carbon ceramics, which are standard on this particular model. 420mm discs at the front and 410mm at the rear. The Sport Turismo part of this car's rather long name refers to its extended roof. We would probably normally call this a shooting brake or even an estate. And I can't see why anyone would go for the regular Saloon when this version would only cost you roughly £3,000 more than the equivalent Saloon. You're getting a bigger boot, you're getting more headroom, in particular in the rear cabin, and it also feels a lot less claustrophobic in there. It's really nice and open and spacious. And you're also getting, to my eyes at least, a better looking package. Under the bonnet, we essentially find a 4-litre V8 twin turbo, similar to the lump that's in Audi's RS6, Audi's RSQ8, and a number of Porsches, including that Cayenne Coupe GTS that I took abroad last year, and in fact their flagship Cayenne Turbo GT. So it's a really impressive combustion engine on its own. But then you add in the hybrid power. Now combined they produce 700 horsepower. That's 570 odd from the combustion engine and about 130 from the electric power only. If you combine the independent figures of torque from the combustion engine and the electric motors, you'd get a total output of a ridiculous 1170 Newton meters of torque. Now the PDK gearbox and the drive shafts, etc., can't really deal with that, so Porsche have had to limit the torque output to a mere 870 Newton meters. That's still an absolutely ridiculous figure, far more than an RS6 or an M5 competition. So you've got plenty of torque and plenty of power, but you need it in this car because it weighs 2.4 tons, which is a fair old chunk. It is just over 5 meters long and feels about 5 meters wide on some of our UK roads, but still 2.4 tons is a lot of weight. So it's going to be interesting to see what it's like when I take it down one of my favorite B roads and when it gets a bit twisty, to see if it still feels like a Porsche underneath. And unlike BMW's M5 or Audi's RS6, this particular car has Porsche's very own PDK gearbox. It's an 8-speed version in this particular car, and that feeds all of that power and torque to all 4 wheels. While we're talking about the wheels, well, they're massive 21-inch all-round, 275 section on the front, and, wait for it, 325 section on the rear. That's insane. And to make things even better, those tyres are Michelin's very own Pilot Sport 4S's. So there shouldn't be any excuse for lack of grip, even on a slippery day like today. Before we jump inside, let's just do a quick recap. This Panamera, as optioned, retails at £163,000. It's just over 5 metres long and weighs 2.4 tonnes. Its 4-litre V8 combustion engine and electrical motors have a combined output of 700 horsepower and 870 newton meters of torque. All of that is fed to the ground via Porsche's PDK 8-speed gearbox and all 4 of these massive 21-inch wheels and tyres. This car has a claimed 0 to 62 figure of just 3.2 seconds. In fact, it has a claimed 0 to 100 miles per hour figure of 7.3 seconds. That's only a second slower than the iconic McLaren F1. Absolute madness. Let's go and have a look at its gorgeous interior. It's lovely in here. Probably no surprise whatsoever to any of you lot. Porsche interiors, especially their modern ones, are just so nice. They're just purposeful places to sit and to be. And this particular car, well, as you'd expect for its price, it's just perfect. It's bang on. I forgot to mention the exterior colour of this car is Dolomite Silver. Few people might have thought it was GT Silver. In fact, I did until I looked at the spec sheet. So it's Dolomite Silver, and the interior of this car is black and crayon. So we've got sort of black upper bits. This is black leather, obviously, the dashboard, etc. The floor mats, thankfully. But the seats and the lower door cards are all crayon, and in fact, this beautiful Alcantara headlining is all crayon. It just looks absolutely stunning. It's lovely and spacious in here anyway, but in this spec with the pan roof, which is optional, it's a really nice place to sit in the front and in the back. And in fact, yesterday 4 of us went out for lunch in this car, and the rear seat passengers kept going on about how nice it is back there, how much room there is, and really is. You get 4 large adults in here without any issues whatsoever. There is a 5th seat in the middle of the bench back there, but that really is an emergency seat. There's not really anywhere for you to put your feet or your legs, and yeah, it doesn't look particularly comfortable. It's also raised a bit, so you would have some sort of headroom issues if you were taller and sitting in the middle. But really think of this car as a luxury 4-seater. Surprise, surprise, this driving position is absolute perfection. Porsche know how to do the best driving positions, and this Panamera is no exception. It will suit and fit all shapes and sizes. This beautiful heated GT Sports steering wheel is just lovely. It really is. I always talk about Porsche steering wheels as being the best in the business, and they really are. There's not much to them. They're just simple. There's not too many buttons going on here. We've got a drive mode, which we'll talk about shortly. But the actual rim of the wheel, just lovely and thin, and that induces as much feel as possible through their EPAS system. You've got these lovely aluminium paddles, again, just very simple, clean, but they look expensive, and they contrast well with the black wheel. And then behind this gorgeous wheel, you've got a lovely analog rev counter with digital displays on the outside. I think that's what Porsche gets so right with all of their very latest and modern models. You've got some analog thrown in there, but with all the digital that you could ever want. Obviously this PCM, when you fire the ignition up, well, it's very easy and intuitive to use. And in fact, in the 4 days that I've been in this car and that stint that I had with that Cayenne Coupe GTS at the end of last year, I'm really acclimatizing myself to all of Porsche's infotainment system, if you like, and I think it works very, very well. There is a center vent here, a bit like they have in the Taycan, which isn't manually adjustable. You need to go into the climate control settings to actually adjust this vent here, which I think is somewhat excessive. So you can move my side around or the left hand side. yeah, it's probably a little bit overkill, but there's no denying that when you turn everything off and that closes up, it does look lovely and clean. And being a Porsche, that's probably going to continue to work throughout its life. When you turn the ignition on in this car, the default setting is e-power, so electrical power. So when you get in it in the morning, it's not going to burst into life with that V8. It's actually going to be quite quiet, which is very handy if you have neighbours close by, which I do. In electrical only, when it's charged up, remember it's a plug-in hybrid, so you can plug it in at home, or you can ask the combustion engine to charge the batteries on a longer journey. But when it is fully charged, it will give you a realistic range of about 30 miles, which isn't bad at all. It will also give you 130 odd horsepower with electrical energy only, and plenty of torque. I've spent a lot of time in this car over the past few days in electric only, and it will quite happily keep up with everyday traffic. In fact, Porsche claim that this will do 90 odd miles an hour using electrical energy only. And the main way that they can achieve that is it's actually connected to the gearbox. So if you look down at the rev counter, which is at 0 when you're in electric, even if you're moving along, which is always a bit weird, you can see the gearbox changing. So you can see it going through the gears, 2, 3, 4, as you build up momentum. So unlike a full EV that traditionally has 1 or 2 gears at the most, this car still has 8 gears when you're in electrical mode, and that really helps with efficiency, and it helps it get up to those higher speeds. When you turn this toggle 1 click clockwise, you then go into hybrid mode, and that's a very intelligent mode, and a mode that I'd probably spend most of my time in if I had this particular car. In hybrid mode, it works between the combustion engine and the electrical motors. And in fact, if you're using your nav, so let's say I've put in a destination that's 50 miles away, I've got a full charge of 30 odd miles, so it wouldn't get there on electrical only, but the car will work out the most efficient way of getting there, so that when I get to my end destination, I've basically used all of my electrical energy and as little fuel as possible. Your next setting is sport, and when you turn that, the combustion engine fires up. And in fact, when you're in sport or sport plus, which is the next mode, the car will aim to charge up the batteries when you don't need the electrical motors, by which I mean if you're just using, let's say, 40, 50, 60% of the combustion engine's power and torque, then it will do its best to charge up the battery power. And in fact, you can tell the car how much charge you want in that battery unit. But then when you put your foot down and you call upon 100% of all the energy that's available, it will then stop charging those batteries, and it will give you that electrical energy along with the combustion engine. So it's very, very clever. You've got a 3-way adjustable suspension setup in here, but you can manually override that, because when you're in Sport Plus, well, it's in its stiffest setting, and here in the UK you just never need a sports car, or whatever this is, a super estate, a super sport Turismo car, I don't know, whatever you want to describe it as, you're not going to need that Sport Plus suspension setting. But I do like the 4 different modes down here, and if you press this drive mode, a bit like with many modern Porsches, you get sport response, so you get 20 seconds of everything. Before we head off, well, we've already talked about the rear seats being very practical. This should have a fairly large boot, but actually it's only 418 litres, and that's because this is a hybrid, so I'm guessing a lot of the batteries and stuff are under the boot floor, so that's not that impressive. The non-hybrid version, so the regular Turbo S Sport Turismo, has closer to 500 litres, so that's quite a chunk difference in boot space, but it's a very nice and usable boot space. And if you do fold these rear seats down, you could quite happily get a couple of bikes and stuff in here. So don't think of it as being a small boot, it's just not as big as you might think when you look at the car on the outside. It also has a slightly sacrificed fuel tank in this car. It's 10 litres smaller than a non-hybrid version, but it's still 80 litres. And I think with a full tank and a full charge, this car's got a realistic range of about 500 miles, which is impressive for something so big, so luxurious, and something that has 700 horsepower. First things first, let's test out this car's claimed acceleration figures. Porsche say it will do the 0 to 62 sprint in just 3.2 seconds. I actually have the brand new Racebox Mini to test out those claims. As many of you know, I've run Raceboxes in my videos and in my cars for the past 2 years or so, and I absolutely love and rely on their traditional GPS unit that attaches to the windscreen. This is their new Mini. This is not a paid advertisement or anything. I just really like their products, and this is the first time I'm going to be testing one. On what better car to test this out for the very first time? You literally just slap it on the top of the dashboard there, making sure it can find some satellites. My app tells me that it's found plenty already, and yeah, you do your time run. So my left foot is hard down on the brake. I'm in drive in Sport Plus. I've got all the traction aids switched off. Right foot will go down on the accelerator right now. It's holding it just below 5,000 RPM. This is going to be violent. Here we go. And there we go. 2.98 seconds to 60 miles an hour, not 62 miles an hour. So you could probably add a tenth to that. That ties in nicely with what Porsche claim. It's a fraction quicker, which is no surprise. Wow, that's just unreal. We're going to start this road piece in e-power with the suspension knocked back into the most comfortable setting. E-power gives you, as we've talked about, a realistic range when it's fully charged of about 30 miles, which is a decent amount of range for a hybrid car, especially one of this size. Will it pull me up this hill? Yep, we're gaining pace going up this very steep incline. So it's an impressive unit on its own. I think even the first generation Panamera, you just didn't see many about. You hardly saw any on the roads, and the ones you did see were in places like Mayfair and Chelsea. So that says a lot about the sort of customers that would buy these. They had lots of cash, and I think that's very true for this second generation facelifted Panamera as well. And this model in particular, well, now that we have the Taycan, the all electric Porsche, which in fact looks very similar to this in Sport Turismo guise, I can't see these selling in even small numbers. I mean, they're such a niche of a niche car, they really are. I said to my other half the first day I got this car, if I won the lottery tomorrow, which I don't play, this would be one of my cars in the garage. This would be the car that I would tear down to the south of France in. Porsche make the Panamera 4S e-hybrid Sport Turismo. That particular model I think is going to be far more popular. It makes a lot more sense in my head. It's £40,000 cheaper than this, so 105 grand base, which is in line with an RS6 or whatever. And the biggest difference between this and that is, well, this car has a 4-litre V8 and that car has a 2.9-litre V6, essentially the same engine that's in the current RS4 and a number of other modern Porsches. Are you going to feel shortchanged in that car compared to this? Well, it's obviously a fair bit lighter because it has a smaller engine, but it still has a combined output of 570 horsepower, and it still has a claimed 0 to 62 figure of 3.7 seconds. So the 4S in my head is quick enough. It definitely is fast enough if you need the hybrid application. If you don't need the hybrid application, then just go out and buy yourself the Turbo S Sport Turismo, because that weighs 300 kilos less than this car, and you also get an extra 60 odd horsepower out of the 4-litre V8 twin turbo. So instead of getting the hybrid drivetrain, you just get a combustion engine, but it's tuned up an extra 60 horsepower, and it weighs, like I said, 300 kilos less. That's 3 of me less. And as a result, well, that Turbo S actually has a claim 0 to 62 figure of 3.1 seconds, which is a tenth quicker than this car. And I'm in no doubt that dynamically it's going to feel a lot better. So I would personally save 40 grand and buy the 4S if I wanted a hybrid, or if I wanted an outright weapon of a wagon, then go out and buy the Turbo S, because it's surely going to be a better car. Also has the bigger 90 litre fuel tank. Anyway, back to this car. Let's see what it's like when we start pushing it through some of the twisties we've got coming up. Let's turn the drive mode into Sport Plus. Knock that over into manual. Pull the lovely paddle. Put it again. Let's knock the suspension back 1, so we're not in sort of super stiff, we're just in stiff. Let's push it through here. Remember, 2.4 tons this is. I mean, how do Porsche do it? It feels so sure-footed, so stable, and so fast. So fast. Those massive brakes we talked about at the beginning of the video, 420mm carbon ceramics on the front axle, you need them. They are standard on this car, but the reason they're standard is you need those. Yeah, steels just would not be up to the task. Maybe stop you once or twice, but if you had some consistent stops, steels would just melt themselves with this much momentum, this much weight. But these, you hit them, and I mean, I've never actually experienced brakes that powerful in any car. Obviously the conditions are prime, but it's those massive 275 section 21-inch tyres at the front, and those huge 325 sections at the rear. I mean, when you hit the brakes, I mean, you can actually feel your brain moving forward. There's a lot of space up here, mind you, but my brain moves from the middle of my head to the front of my head very quickly. But there's an easy solution for that. I can put it back again by just shifting down to second gear. Oh, yeah, okay, it's back in place again. The way this picks up and the way it deploys its power is just mind-blowing. It really is. You can feel the tyres digging in, but it's not scrabbling around for grip. You can just feel it connecting with the tarmac and just kind of clawing its way down the road. It's just biblically fast. It really is. And the first time you know how quick you're going is when you do touch the brakes. You can feel the momentum, you can feel that pace and velocity, if you like, but it's not scary like it is in some really big heavy SUVs. When you're in them and you're piling on speed and you hit the brakes, it's almost a little bit of a sort of check you moment, you know. It's like, oh, calm down, Joe. This is a lot of momentum and it's not particularly stable or planted. Whereas this car, it just feels massively planted. It really does. Yes, it does feel heavy, but it also feels scarily capable. I reckon 1 lap around Silverstone in this would be as fast as probably a base 911. 1 lap, 2 laps, and oh no, it wouldn't do 2 laps. The tyres would melt, the brakes would. It's not a track car, but what I'm saying is a couple of minutes of flat out driving in this, it would be so impressive, and it would defy physics. Oh, it's just so good. Dab the brakes, settle it, off the brakes, turn in, stays as flat as anything. Put your foot down. I mean, you just can't for more than a second on the public road because you just end up over the speed limit. But turning in here just feels so nice. How's that possible? But all the time I'm thinking, what would it feel like if it was 300 kilos lighter in the Turbo S? I mean, that car must be an absolute animal. Let's see what it's like through these couple of bends. You'll recognise these bends from many of my videos. sure it's not going to be too elegant through here, but once again the front end's just amazing. Slow it down, get it turned in, and then launch control basically. I had to come off the throttle then because, well, I was going to go over the speed limit, and also it felt like it was going to take off. It just gives you so much confidence. It's just not right. It's not right. You look in the rear view mirror and you can see all that space behind you, the rear bench and the massive boot behind that. It just doesn't make any sense. It drives so well, and providing you've got the suspension in either the softest setting, which it is at the moment, which I think really is the best setting for the UK pretty much in any car that's performance sort of biased, or the one up from that where it's a bit stiffer. The ride quality is amazing. Slight negative is something you might have picked up on camera, is the tyre roar, and Porsche's a bit renowned for having loud cabins from their tyre roar. I think there's only so much you can do to sort of block out the rumbling noise of those 325s in the rear axle, and I think that's most of what you hear, is those sort of resonating through the cabin. Maybe the saloon is better insulated, doesn't have the boot to sort of enhance that sound, but really there's not many other negatives that I can talk about with this car. Yes, it's ridiculously expensive, and yes, I can't see them selling too many, and if you do see someone driving one of these, this particular model, they are they're earning a few quid. Trust me, they really are, because this is about as bling and affluent as any car can be in this day and age, in my opinion, because it is such a sort of small niche segment of the market. Anyway guys, thanks a lot for watching this video. I look forward to bringing you more content very, very soon. Until then, take it easy. Cheers. This is going to go at the end of the video, so I really need to.
It's so quick.
Yeah, I need to.
I've got
you know,
nothing to say other than get me out.
You got nothing to say. Okay. All right.
It's gonna be okay.
Ready?
No, I don't.
Here we go. 5,000.
Please don't. I really don't know.
Woohoo!